Welcome everyone to 60 interesting humanoid encounters. Unlike the last video which went over a bit more mainstream encounters, this video will be a mix of those that haven't really been covered and usually involve only one single encounter, so they're really interesting. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoy, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and let's get straight into the video. Night of the Androids. In the summer of 1973, an 18-year-old named Skeptical X and his cousin Tony decide to spend a late Friday night outside, choosing the steps of a nearby elementary school as their spot to enjoy a six-pack of beer. Their quiet night though took a turn when they heard the distinctive rumbling of a car approaching. It was a 1959 Cadillac convertible moving slowly, making a lot of noise because of the absence of a muffler. The car then passed them and disappeared, leaving them wondering about what happened but eventually moving on from the incident. Later, wanting a change of scenery, Skeptical X and Tony walked around the school building and found themselves on a poorly lit street with minimal houses and surrounded by woods. The sound of the car's engine reappeared, and as it approached, they decided to hide in the tree line. This time, as the car passed slowly, they observed three occupants, a man driving, a woman in the passenger seat, and a small boy in the back. Despite the darkness, the dashboard lights illuminate their faces, revealing that they looked exactly like mannequins, with no movement or change in facial expressions. After the car disappeared, feeling unsettled, Skeptical X and Tony decide to head home. On their way home, they were stopped by a police officer who inquired about their late night activities and if they had witnessed anything unusual. They shared their encounter with the car and its strange occupants. The officer suggested that they probably had seen a family involved in stealing bicycles, a notion that initially offered some relief. However, Skeptical X later reflected on the encounter with skepticism, questioning the likelihood of a family, including a child, engaging in theft late at night without any visible stolen items in the car. The encounter remained vivid in Skeptical X's memory, mainly the oddity of the family's motionless state if they were indeed out to steal bicycles. And the explanation and timing of the police officer's appearance seemed too coincidental, leaving Skeptical X to ponder the true nature of the night's events and the eerie image of the unmoving figures in the car. Horrific blurry face alien attack. On the evening of September 30th, 2018, in Avith, Finland, an event unfolded involving a family of three. The sequence of events began ordinarily enough, with the family settled in their living room, engaged in the usual evening routine of watching television. However, the normalcy was suddenly interrupted at around 9 o'clock when both the TV and computer suddenly powered off. Despite this, the household lights remained on, yet a weird silence enveloped the environment, both inside and outside the house. Compelled to investigate the sudden quiet, the main witness looked out the kitchen window. It was here that the initial encounter occurred, marked by the setting of an object described as car-sized, completely black, and covered with flashing red and blue lights. This unexpected discovery was soon followed by an even more startling development when the witness's wife appeared at the door, accompanied by two entities of notable description. These beings were human-sized, dressed in black overalls, and their faces were indistinct, causing an immediate sense of alarm and confusion. The situation then escalated rapidly. The witness's instinctive reaction was to protect his family right away, since he urged his wife to take their daughter to safety upstairs. However, his plea went unheeded. The entities then proceeded to enter the main living area of the house, demonstrating abilities beyond human by immobilizing the witness through what was described as a magnetic beam. This resulted in his collapse, followed by the application of a metallic, cage-like device around his head, emitting bright white light and causing intense discomfort. Amidst this chaos, it was noted that the family's dogs were subjected to violence and that the wife exhibited signs of being under some form of control or influence, which was really weird. She started acting weird, and there was even some physical changes, like the appearance of black-red rings around her eyes. And the witness's ordeal continued with further unsettling demands and actions by the entities, including being led upstairs under duress and subjected to humiliating and invasive procedures. Throughout, the witness described a sense of helplessness and desperation, compounded by the altered states of his family members, who seemed disconnected and unresponsive to his appeals for escape. In a subsequent phase of the encounter, the entities revealed human-like faces and inflicted physical harm upon the witness, including stabbing and beating, before conveying their intent to use his biological material for unspecified experiments or purposes. Remarkably, before their departure, the entities reportedly repaired the damage to his house using a stone-like object, leaving no physical evidence of the night's events. The aftermath of this incident is characterized by trauma and confusion, with the witness struggling to come to terms with the experience, which his family had zero memory of. A humanoid from the deep. In 1970, Jerry Myers, a police patrolman in a small Florida city, experienced something really weird. After completing his shift, Jerry drove to his favorite spot along the inland waterway where he would often unwind. It was during this routine moment of solitude that he heard a low humming sound, which gradually intensified as he approached the water's edge. It was then that the source of this sound manifested as a flicker of light, evolving into the form of a humanoid figure hovering just above the water's surface. This figure, which Jerry perceived as wearing a suit resembling that of a spacefarer, emitted a humming that transformed into a voice. However, this voice did not reach him through the usual means of sound waves traveling through air to his ears. Instead, Jerry received it directly in his mind, likening the experience to listening through high-quality headphones, but with the clarity and depth far more normal than auditory perception. The suit worn by the entity was described as having a lead-like color with a slightly reflective quality, and its helmet featured a face shield made of a glass-like, somewhat reflective material. Through this shield, Jerry could discern the vague outline of a head and face that appeared mostly human. The entity engaged Jerry in a telepathic conversation, expressing curiosity about human warfare, particularly the reasons behind it and the mechanisms of killing and weapon functions. It questioned the selection process for combatants in war, prompting Jerry to explain the drafting system. During this exchange, Jerry became aware of a deeper, more nuanced communication occurring within his mind, where snippets of his knowledge and memories were being accessed and shared. After this exchange of information and ideas, the entity informed Jerry of its intention to return in the future before gradually fading from view. Jerry, left alone on the shoreline, realized that what felt like only half an hour of interaction had actually spanned over 2.5 hours, as evidenced by the clock in his car. Reflecting on the encounter, Jerry struggled with its interpretation. Although he considered the possibility of time travel, the true nature of his experience remained elusive. This event ended up leaving a lasting impact on Jerry, permeating his thoughts and dreams in the days that followed. The Ghouls Next Door. This event takes place in the autumn of 2010 and centers around Marcel's experience with his new neighbors in a New York City apartment. Marcel, living in an aging, budget-friendly apartment building, found himself frequently alone because of a roommate who traveled often. This story, though, basically revolves around a duo that moved into the flat across the hall. The man, known to Marcel as only Jeff, was a mysterious figure, seemingly preferring his own company to that of others and rarely venturing outside his apartment. His behavior was marked by a reclusive nature and an odd habit of keeping his television on continuously, day and night, which Marcel found really unusual. This, though, was only the beginning of the strangeness that would envelop Marcel's life. Shortly after Jeff's arrival, a woman appeared to join him. She was Asian, in her 20s, much like Jeff, and her interaction with Marcel was limited but strange. Her response to Marcel's greeting was to point to her apartment door and state, "I stay here," before retreating inside and watching Marcel with an intensity that left him feeling unnerved. Over the following weeks, Marcel noticed a pattern of behavior from the couple that included frequent deliveries of takeout food. It seemed they rarely, if ever, cooked, opting instead for a diet sustained entirely by delivered meals. This odd routine led Marcel to wonder about the source of their income and lifestyle. The peculiarity of the situation, though, escalated when Marcel's roommate, returning briefly, shared his own observations and experiences. He too had found the couple's behavior to be bizarre, noting that a friend who delivered pizza to them reported that they were oddly secretive, making efforts to prevent anyone from seeing inside their apartment. The situation, though, reached a pivotal moment on November 25th, when Marcel encountered Jeff and the woman outside their apartment. The accidental dropping of a grocery bag revealed its contents to be an assortment of canned meats, with no other groceries in sight. As Marcel bent to help collect the spilled items, he looked up to find Jeff demanding he leave the items, his eyes a solid, unnerving black. The woman shared the same disturbing feature, staring at Marcel with eyes that defied natural explanation before they both hurried back into their apartment. Shaken by the encounter, Marcel sought refuge with friends, unable to shake off the fear and confusion that the incident had sparked. Upon his eventual return to the apartment, he discovered the once constant noise of the couple's television had ceased, and the couple had apparently vanished, leaving no trace behind except for Marcel's lingering questions and newfound phobias. He developed claustrophobia, a condition he never before experienced, and found himself unable to consume meat without becoming violently ill, an aversion that emerged suddenly and with no apparent cause. These changes in Marcel's life seem inexplicably tied to his encounter with the couple, leading him to conclude that they were not human but entities of an unknown nature, possibly hiding in human form. Elk Stolen Beger. In August 1956, Ruth Bennett found herself at the center of a deeply unsettling event while staying with their parents at the Woods family farm near Elk Stolen, Derbyshire. This area, which has a bunch of legends behind it, particularly concerns a mermaid set to inhabit a bottomless pool on the moors. The legend of the mermaid was first introduced to Ruth by Mr. Woods, who, in a gathering that included both families, recounted a story about a pool said to be home to a mermaid with the power to draw men to their deaths. According to Woods, this entity would compel any man to walk into her pool and drown by merely catching his gaze. This story was not mere folklore to the locals, since it was given weight by a recent incident involving a man named Mr. Marsh, who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. His last known path led directly to the pool, with his horse and cart found abandoned nearby. The tale piqued the curiosity of Ruth and her family, though, to the extent that they decided to visit the pool, despite the warnings not to. Dressed appropriately for the moorland's unpredictable weather, they embarked on their journey across the moors, the pool located some 8 miles from Elkstone. Upon arrival, the landscape seemed to embody the mystique of the legends that had been passed down to generations. The pool was surrounded by a fence and contradicted any notion of an accidental fall, suggesting that any who did enter was with their intention or under some compulsion. As they approached the pool, Margaret suggested that James pose as if looking for a mermaid, but this caused something to happen. A sudden gust of wind snatched James's coat, tossing him into the murky waters below. What followed, though, was a moment of profound dread, being that James, as if under a spell, moved towards the pool with the vacant look in his eyes. The family tried to call for him, but it was like they were unable to reach him. It was only through the quick intervention of Margaret and Ruth that James was pulled back from the edge, the family shaken by the encounter. Mr. Woods, arriving just in time, seemed to have anticipated the potential danger, urging the family to leave the moors immediately. The encounter at the mermaid's pool left a lasting impression on Ruth and her family. James, a former master sergeant who had faced death before, admitted to being genuinely terrified by his experience near the water, and if that really was the mermaid. The Hawaii River Abduction. In 1975, Tony M. and her husband embarked on a camping trip along the Hawaii River in eastern Oregon, not realizing that this journey would profoundly alter their lives. Both had a keen interest in archaeology, which led them to this remote location for excavation work. However, their experience transcended more earthly discoveries. The couple initially planned to spend 3 days in the wilderness, but their trip took an unusual turn right from the start. They encountered a mysterious storm that seemed to target their route specifically, washing away the road ahead. This event was peculiar because others in the area didn't report experiencing any storm. Also, while boating on a lake, they barely avoided a collision with a water skier who appeared not to see them at all. These odd occurrences were just the beginning though. As they prepared to return home, their journey, which typically lasted 6 hours, weirdly enough extended to 8. 2 hours had vanished without a trace, leaving Tony and her husband bewildered and seeking answers. Feeling unsettled by these events and the subsequent changes in their lives, including Daryl's deepening depression and Tony's intensification of psychic abilities, they reached out to Terry A. Hartman, a hypnotherapist and ufologist, in August 1977. Hartman conducted extensive interviews and hypnosis sessions with the couple, revealing weird details about their experience. Under hypnosis, they recalled stopping their truck near a creek to cool off the engine. It was then that Daryl noticed a silent, plane-like object resembling a B-52 bomber, while Tony described it as a supersonic jet. Further down the road, they spotted a shiny object resting on a hillside. Without discussing it, they both felt drawn to the object. Their recollection continued with them approaching the unidentified object, which Daryl described as feeling like Teflon. A ladder then appeared, leading them into the craft, and Daryl, followed by Tony in a trance-like state, climbed aboard. Inside, Tony remembered a room with dark walls and small lights, and a table where Daryl lay strapped down, surrounded by 2 humanoid beings with wrinkled, apple-like skin and no visible facial features. These beings communicated with Tony, explaining that they meant no harm and had not intended for her to follow Daryl into the craft. They were interested in the couple because of Tony's psychic abilities. During this encounter, Daryl received treatment for an old elbow injury, which was miraculously healed. After over 46 hours of taped hypnosis sessions, Hartman concluded that the couple had indeed experienced an abduction by extraterrestrial beings. This conclusion was supported by the healing of Daryl's elbow and the significant impact on their lives following the incident. Acrid Critter of Winterfold. The Acrid Critter of Winterfold involves a setting of a really unusual creature on the night of December 16, 1967. This event occurred near an old mansion in Winterfold, Surrey. The primary witnesses were a young man named Philip Freeman, a 22-year-old carpenter, and his girlfriend Angela Carter, who was aged 20. The story goes that the couple were returning to walking from Philip's brother's house in Cranley. Philip and Angela had stopped their car in the Winterfold forest, about 3 kilometers from Cranley, to clear the windshield of mist. Upon opening the car door though, they were immediately struck by a strong, unpleasant odor. This odor was so overpowering that it prompted Philip to quickly re-enter his car. It was at this moment that Philip noticed a weird figure close to the car window. He described seeing a face about 25 centimeters long and 20 centimeters wide, which was white and possibly faintly luminous. This so-called face had no discernible features. Attached to it was what appeared to be an arm that reached up to the car roof, suggesting that the entity intended to interact with the vehicle in some manner. Below this so-called arm was a dark, bell-shaped body which became illuminated by the car's rear lights as the creature moved towards the rear of the vehicle. In a state of alarm and fear, Philip struggled to start the car. As soon as they were able to drive away from the scene though, the foul smell that had enveloped them dissipated. Angela, profoundly affected by the experience, refused to return to the site thereafter. Upon arriving home, Philip's parents attested to his agitated state, confirming the impact that the encounter had on him. This incident was later reported in the 14 Times magazine's 10th issue and was even investigated by Charles Bowen, who included it in the Flying Saucer Review, citing his own investigation into the matter. The description of the creature and the circumstances of the setting place this event within the realm of high strangeness, a term used in ufology and paranormal studies to describe encounters that are especially bizarre, unexplainable, and outside the bounds of common experience or scientific explanation. Blue Thing on the Ice Age Trail. On August 22, 1999, in Wisconsin, Michelle and her friend decided to hike the Ice Age Trail, a remote and secluded path known for its natural beauty. During their hike, Michelle chose to move ahead of her friend. As Michelle progressed along the trail, a sudden movement caught her eye about 50 feet ahead. Focusing on the movement, she observed a blue-gray figure advancing towards her path. Initially, Michelle mistook the figure for a cyclist in a blue jacket because of its rapid approach. However, she soon realized that the figure was not on a bicycle, but seemed to glide smoothly over the ground without any visible means of propulsion. This entity was distinguished by a remarkable feature, being a long blue plume that extended from the back of its head, fluttering as it moved. Whether this plume was similar to smoke or feathers remained unclear though. Almost as quickly as it appeared, the figure altered its course and glided off the path, disappearing into the surrounding trees. This sudden departure allowed Michelle a brief moment to observe the plume more clearly. Confused and possibly alarmed by what she had seen, Michelle hurried back to her friend and described the encounter. They then both decided to explore the area where the blue thing had vanished, but found nothing out of the ordinary. No further evidence of the figure's presence was ever discovered, leaving them with more questions than answers. Blue Pirate in the Front Yard. At the age of 8 or 9, a girl in Victoria, Australia saw something really odd right outside her home. This event happened about 10 years ago from a recounting on Reddit under the username Little Monkey Bear. As the story goes, she lived in a quiet suburban town where the most activity came from school kids walking along the paths. One day though, at 4 p.m. after coming home back from school, she looked through the lounge window into the front yard. What she saw was a strange figure standing there, which she described in full detail. The figure looked like a man in his 30s, about 6 feet tall, wearing a light blue pirate costume. His skin was really pale, almost white, and he had an average male face with empty eyes that seemed to lack life. His dirty blonde hair was tied back under a light blue pirate hat, and he wore a light blue jacket with long sleeves that stopped at the wrist, showing his pale hands. Underneath the jacket, he had a white ruffled collar top. The entire outfit was pristine, without any stains or dirt. And despite standing under the Australian afternoon sun, the figure didn't cast a shadow and didn't seem to be breathing. Feeling uneasy, she hid from the entity by jumping down onto the couch. After a while, she looked again, and the entity was still there, giving her the impression it was watching her, similar to how some paintings' eyes seem to follow you. She stared at it for another 2 to 3 minutes before it simply disappeared. It said she doesn't recall exactly how it vanished, but it was for sure gone after some time. This experience left her frightened to look into the front yard for a long time, even after moving houses. She often feels like she's being watched, especially in certain rooms of the houses she's lived in. In her first house, it was the corridor leading from the front door, the second a room next to her bedroom, and in her current house, the spare bedroom. She often gets the feeling of someone watching her through the window of the spare bedroom, even though it's impossible for anyone from the neighboring houses to see inside. The Woods Beckon, a Sasquatch Encounter. In 1976, in Barron County, Wisconsin, about 7 miles out on Highway 48 from Cumberland, a Native American woman recounts a chilling encounter from her childhood when she was about 6 or 7 years old. She, along with her siblings and cousins, experienced a series of unsettling events one summer night that culminated in an encounter with the humanoid creature. The evening began routinely enough, with the children home alone, their mother at work, and their father away. They engaged in typical child's play, dialing their own home phone number to make it ring and then hanging up. But the night took a strange turn when the doorbell rang several times with no one at the door upon checking. Despite their confusion and growing apprehension, especially since their normally robust dog displayed uncharacteristic fear, the children tried to settle back into their evening routine. The situation though then escalated about half an hour after the last doorbell incident. The eldest brother went to the refrigerator only to return moments later in a state of hysterical crying, claiming that he saw something peeking around a tree outside, gesturing for him to come outside. His description of the creature was vague, but unmistakably non-human, instilling a deep fear in all the children. Their fright was compounded by a knock at the back door, leading to an encounter with a terrified motorist who claimed to have heard unsettling noises while his car was broken down nearby. The children called their uncles for help, who arrived armed and investigated the surrounding area but found no immediate cause for the motorist's fear. The night stare though ended up peaking when the children noticed a large shape passing by a window. Despite their fear, they couldn't resist the impulse to investigate. The witness, along with their cousin and sister, ventured outside only to spot what initially seemed like a tree stump in the darkness. Upon closer inspection though, this stump moved and turned, revealing itself to be a creature with red eyes, according to the cousin. Startled, they retreated back inside. The situation though kept getting worse, as one of the cousins ventured alone around the house, only to encounter another entity peeking around the garage. This being had a distinctive cone-shaped head, differentiating it from anything human or animal they knew. The children spent the night in a state of fear, especially after seeing a large, dark figure outside the window. When the parents returned home, they were met with the children's frantic stories. A spiritual guide called to the scene suggested that the creatures outside, thought to be 3 in number, might have been looking to replace a lost child of their own. Over the years, the witness noted other strange occurrences around the property, but nothing that matched the intensity of that night in 1976. The Algers Devil Man. In 1938, Algiers, Louisiana experienced disturbances caused by a figure known as the Algers Devil Man. This event occurred 2 decades after the infamous Axeman of New Orleans, who claimed to be a demon but was never caught. Unlike the Axeman, the Algers Devil Man was not known for violent acts, but rather for causing panic through trickery and supernatural displays. The Algers Devil Man was first reported in September 1938, described with features such as long black horns, chicken-like eyes, and bright pink ears, resembling sunflowers. His abilities included disappearing at will or transforming into different forms, including a baboon. It's said he would move around the city, causing trouble for residents by insulting women and causing damage to properties. One of the first encounters involved a couple driving home after a night out. They were approached by a man asking for a lift, which they refused because of his unsettling appearance. Despite driving away, they encountered the same man multiple times during their journey home. On one occasion, he transformed into a demonic figure with horns, causing the wife to faint. He later appeared riding a brown horse, but was eventually outrun by the couple's car. Following this incident, neighbors informed the police, who initiated a whole search for the individual causing these disturbances. Even the police had several encounters with the Devil Man, but were unable to capture him because of his ability to evade capture using supernatural means, such as returning bullets fired at him with hairy hands. The situation ended up escalating as more reports surfaced, including the Devil Man insulting women in public and causing chaos in the community. The police responded by stating that anyone claiming to have seen the Devil Man should be firmly arrested, though the only person arrested was Clark Colton, a man who claimed to have powers and was sent by a spiritual monarch named King Zulu. George Horrell, a local business owner, tried to offer Carlton protection from the police by providing his account of Carlton's behavior, which included Carlton threatening children who teased him and causing an urban legend to grow around him. Despite Carlton's arrest though, reports of the Devil Man still continued, including sightings of him in bars and performing a specific dance in a popular club. These reports led to more and more increased public interest, with some even seeking to profit from the situation by claiming to have encountered the Devil Man. The panic though reached a peak when a disturbance at a local school was triggered by someone shouting "Devil Man," causing students and teachers to react in fear. Also, rumors of a devil baby being born in a segregated section of New Orleans further fueled the hysteria. Micro-terrestrials of Malaysia. In August 1970, in Bukit Mertajam, Pulau Pinang, Malaysia, an encounter took place involving two boys and what would be later referred to as micro-terrestrials. On that night, the boys ventured to a location where a UFO was reported to have landed the previous day. Upon arrival, they discovered a round, blue object on the ground surrounded by several small beings, each standing about 3 inches tall. These beings were not only distinct in their size but also in appearance, described as being unattractive and wearing uniforms. One of the boys, who got really curious, attempted to even capture one of these beings. In response, though, the small humanoid produced a device resembling a gun and fired at the boy, hitting him on the hand. The startled boys quickly left the scene to seek help from their teachers. However, upon returning with the adults, both the craft and its tiny occupants had vanished. The same day though, one of the boys encountered the beings again near the school. This time, he observed a small UFO and 5 beings emerging from it. The leader, distinguishable by a yellow uniform and horn-like protrusions on its head, directed a weapon at the boy and fired, causing him to black out. When he regained consciousness, he was found lying in bushes with a small red mark on his leg, a physical reminder of the encounter. Further instances of sightings were reported in the village too. 2 other boys witnessed 2 of the small beings, both dressed in yellow and one seemingly alarmed. Despite their efforts to catch these beings, they managed to escape. That evening, another encounter involved the son of a local police officer who also reported being shot at by one of these beings, sustaining a minor cut on his hand. Abducted by the Ant People. On Halloween night in 1975, a 6-year-old boy from Staten Island had an encounter that would later be recognized as an alien abduction, an event that still remained significant well into his adulthood. That night, he encountered beings he would later refer to as the Ant People because of their resemblance to insects. These beings were child-sized, and the boy, unfamiliar with the concept of UFOs or aliens as portrayed in popular culture, simply reacted with curiosity rather than fear. The beings, described as having a notable resemblance to ants, conducted medical examinations on the boy. Although there was no verbal communication, the entities smiled at him throughout the ordeal. The boy noted that the most discomfort he ever felt during the encounter was when he was required to sit in a fetal position without moving, which he found very uncomfortable. After the encounter, when he shared his experience with his parents, they dismissed his story with laughter. Growing up, the boy didn't feel harmed by the experience and described himself as a very happy, normal person. His interest in UFOs, though, sparked at the age of 18 when he recognized one of the beings depicted in a ufology book his friend owned, matching the memory of his abductors. This recognition reaffirmed his belief in his childhood encounter with the Ant People. As an adult, the witness pursued an education at an Ivy League school and even became a lawyer. But despite his profession and everything, he maintains his belief in aliens and his authenticity of his experience as a child. Mr. Orola and the Invaders. In 1988, in the small Bacanano, Chile, Mr. Floridan Orola, age 78, experienced an intense light invading the tranquility of his hut. Struggling with not being able to sleep that night, Orola was startled awake by a light so bright it made night seem like day, disturbing not only him but also his dogs, which barked an alarm. That night, Orola received a telepathic message urging him to open his door. Upon doing so, he was met by 2 humanoid figures of short stature and yellowish skin, which he noted had features resembling those often described as Oriental. These beings didn't communicate verbally, but seemed to have the ability to project their intentions directly into Orolana's mind, attempting to induce sleep or trance-like state in him. Despite feeling an overwhelming sense of fatigue under the creatures' gaze, Orola managed to resist their influence. Eventually, the beings departed, and shortly after, Orola witnessed the ascent of a luminous object into the sky, marking the end of the visitation. This incident in Bacadano shares a geographical proximity with another unusual event reported 12 years later, known as the Bacadano Thing, involving a glowing entity and unexplained physical effects on a witness. The connection between these two events, both occurring in a relatively small community, suggests a pattern of strange occurrences that have left a mark on the local folklore and the individuals involved. Angelos Electric Assailants. On November 24, 1978, Angelo De Ambros, a 61-year-old from Gallio, Italy, was collecting firewood in the forest when he encountered two unusual figures. These entities were hovering near him, one slightly taller at about 4 feet while the other was a bit shorter. D'Ambros observed their distinct features, being large sunken white eyes, pear-shaped heads, upward standing ears, and small tusks protruding from their mouths. Their skin appeared yellowish, and they wore dark, tight overalls. Notably, their hands and feet were large in proportion to their bodies, with elongated fingers and toes. The smaller of the two creatures circled D'Ambros, making unintelligible sounds. At the same time, the taller one attempted to take D'Ambros's machete. In the ensuing struggle, D'Ambros felt electric shocks travel up his arm, which might have allowed the beings to seize the knife. Deciding to fight rather than flee, D'Ambros used the branch he had collected for firewood to fend off the creatures. The entities quickly retreated, prompting D'Ambros to pursue them. Chasing the beings through the forest, D'Ambros came upon a clearing where he witnessed a metallic, disc-shaped object with a dome that featured a trapdoor. He saw an arm closing this trapdoor just before the craft, measuring about 12 feet in width, took off into the sky with a burst of red flame. It simply just disappeared from view. Reigning Warlocks in East Africa. In the early 2000s, East Africa was the center of a series of unparalleled incidents that seemed to defy explanation. People were reportedly falling from the sky. These events, primarily documented in Lusaka, Zambia, and later in Tanzania, was really weird to the populace in the area. In Lusaka, which is the capital city of Zambia, throughout the year 2000, residents were startled by the sudden appearance of nude individuals on rooftops of various structures, ranging from residential homes to gas stations. The consensus among locals was that these individuals were practicing witchcraft, leading to their unintended landings. These occurrences lacked detailed individual accounts though, but collectively suggested that whatever was going on, it was supernatural. One really weird incident though occurred on December 31st, 2000 in Kasanda, a mining town close to Kabwe. A man fell from the sky and suffered injuries that led to his death. The absence of his identity in reports only added to the mystery, reinforcing the seriousness of these phenomena. Another notable event took place on January 3rd, 2003 in the Dodoma region of Tanzania. Mary Edwards, a witness attending a Christian service outside a church, saw a figure descend from the clouds and land near the congregants. This individual was actually recognized by some villagers, but the name was respectfully withheld, claiming his aircraft had malfunctioned on a journey to Masangari village. His description of preparing for flight with attention to fuel mirrored the routine precautions of any careful traveler, but his journey still ended abruptly under mysterious circumstances. Upon further inquiry though, it was revealed that this man engaged in witchcraft, using a traditional flying basket known as a ungu for his nocturnal ventures. His attire, which was minimal and functional for his activities, and his admission of using a soporific substance to subdue his family and victims, underscored the depth of these practices. However though, his unexpected visit to the church that night, which he attributed to divine intervention, marked a turning point in his life. Confronted by the tangible presence of a faith community, he decided to renounce his practices, symbolically destroying his talisman, clothing, and even his ungo. The congregation's acceptance and support, manifest in the provision of new clothes, signified his integration into a new way of life. giant Atal. At about 1:45 a.m. on November 12, 1976, at the Talavera Air Force Base in Spain, an unusual incident occurred when two sentries stationed at the base were alerted by an unusual high-pitched whistling noise. Motivated by both duty and curiosity, they ventured outside to investigate the source of the sound. Their search was quickly rewarded with the sight of a bright light hovering in the sky above them. Shortly thereafter, a third soldier joined the initial pair, and together they both directed their attention towards the fuel stockpiles, suspecting possible sabotage. Despite an extensive search, they found no evidence of tampering or unauthorized entry. However, the situation escalated then when they perceived what was described as a sudden whirlwind accompanied by the sound of twigs snapping from a nearby clump of bushes. In an attempt to uncover any potential intruder, they sent a dog into the thicket. The dog emerged moments later, displaying signs of distress and discomfort, whimpering and covering its ears. What followed next was beyond the realm of their expectations, though. A glowing green mass began to materialize in front of them, gradually taking the shape of a humanoid figure. This figure stood at an impressive height of about 9 feet and appeared to be covered in what would be described as a spacesuit. Notably, the entity had a human-like face but seemed to be missing the lower halves of its arms and legs. The encounter then took a dramatic turn when one of the guards, in a state of heightened alarm, attempted to use his machine gun against the apparition. However, before he could act, he was overcome by a weird paralysis, dropping to the ground and exclaiming in fear for his life and the lives of his companions. Despite this, the other two soldiers managed to discharge several rounds at the entity, which then vanished in a flash of light, leaving no trace of its presence. In the aftermath of this experience, an extensive examination of the area was conducted the following morning. Intriguingly, no spent bullet casings were found at the scene, and there was even no evidence of damage where the entity had appeared, despite corroborative reports of gunfire heard by other base personnel during the incident. The authorities at the base acknowledged that shots had for sure been fired, but remained unknown about the subject of the entity. The Rhine Mountain Abduction. In April 1975, John Womack was driving near Rhine Mountain in North Alabama when he encountered a really unusual phenomenon. A 3-foot-tall diameter ball of fire descended from the sky, navigating through tree branches before landing on the road ahead of his car. This object, exhibiting a seemingly intelligent path, led Womack through a series of turns before stopping in a meadow near a creek. Upon exiting his car to investigate, the ball of fire ascended rapidly, disappearing over the trees. Moments later, he heard a humming sound, signaling the arrival of a large, silvery disc-like craft. The UFO, glowing with a yellowish-blue aura, hovered about 100 feet from Womack before emitting a bright column of light towards the ground. Womack, initially retreating, was soon enveloped in a beam of red light and found himself unconscious. Upon regaining consciousness, Womack found himself aboard the craft, seated in a padded chair connected to a helmet and a machine. The room was illuminated without any visible light sources and contained 3 types of beings: human-like leaders with egg-shaped heads, giant beings with hairy bodies and prehistoric facial features, and peculiar 5-foot-tall creatures with multiple arms, flipped feet, and bearded faces. The leaders communicated with Womack using a translator device, ensuring him of his safety and welcoming him as a guest. They revealed their diet of plant-based pellets and the use of a pill that purges the mind of negative influences, prompting a state of pure joy and peace. The craft's leaders shared insights into their civilization, technology, and views on Earth's society, emphasizing the dangers of premature technological advancements without the requisite wisdom and moral development. Womack was then shown visions of the leader's world, filled with diverse ecosystems and powered entirely by solar energy. There was even a tour of the spacecraft that unveiled its intricate layout and advanced technology, including a device capable of detailed internal scans, and even another that provided a glimpse into atomic structures. Before his departure, Womack was offered a journey to quote-unquote the stars, experiencing a transcendental voyage that showcased the beauty of the cosmos and the fragility of life on planetary scales. This journey, however, was hinted to be a projection rather than a physical trip. The encounter concluded with Womack's return near the meadow, left with profound questions about the nature of reality and the existence of life as a possible dream. The Law in Lycanthrope. On the evening of February 27, 1971, in Lano, Oklahoma, Donald Childs experienced a life-altering encounter that nearly cost him his life because of a heart attack. Childs witnessed a creature of extraordinary nature, a humanoid with canine features, crouched in his front yard, seemingly trying to drink from a fish pond. This encounter marked the beginning of what would become known as the Law in Lycanthrope incident. Donald Childs, 35 at the time, survived his ordeal and after being released from the hospital, shared his account with the local police officer, Clancy Williams. He described seeing a tall, hair-covered humanoid with a face that defied easy description. This report was first among several that would surface in Lano throughout 1971. Following Childs' sighting, the police received numerous calls from distressed citizens reporting a large creature wearing small pants. Witnesses described its movement as chaotic, running swiftly, avoiding cars, and navigating through residential areas with surprising agility. According to Officer Harry Ezel, the creature demonstrated an ability to move swiftly on all fours, and its appearance was alarming enough to unsettle a group of soldiers at Fort Sill, who also reported their encounter with the being. The creature, described variously as resembling a werewolf, was seen darting around the city over a couple of nights. Major Clarence Hill, a local police commander, even issued an alert for his officers to be on lookout for this being. Despite the heightened attention though, the creature had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a city grappling with fear and confusion. Amid the panic, there were even suggestions that the incidents might have been a hoax perpetrated by a local teenager known for causing trouble, who allegedly wore a mask to scare people. This theory was bolstered by claims of a photograph published in the Lano Constitution showing the police chief holding a mask and laughing. However, this explanation didn't sit well with everyone, given the creature's reported abilities like surviving a 17-foot fall unscathed and causing a seasoned soldier to fear. The creature was not only reported to have an ape-like face, but also to have worn shorts, which added to the confusion about its nature. Some speculated that it might be a case of a hoax gone too far, while others consider the possibility of a paranormal phenomenon similar to the Lobizon of Argentina or a phantom attacker. The Clapison Cosmonauts. On the night of June 7, 1971, in Rosedale, which is a suburb of Alberta, Canada, this event unfolded involving Esther Clapson. He was a resident of the area and noticed an unusual light coming from a nearby field. Compelled by curiosity and accompanied by her dog George, she ventured closer to identify the source of this disturbance. What she discovered, though, was an object of unconventional shape and origin, marking the beginning of what would be known as the Clapison Cosmonauts incident. The object she encountered resembled a mattress in shape, glowing intensely and resting on the ground. This illuminated craft, about 6 meters in length, 2 meters in width, and about 2.4 meters in height, bore an open section that emitted a diffuse white light, illuminating its interior and surroundings. Within and around this object, Esther observed 3 humanoid entities. These beings were covered with greenish-gray, tight-fitting uniforms with broad hoods similar to a diver's suit. Their hands were encased in pointed mitts, featuring long, thin thumbs and narrow wrists. Although their faces remained obscured by the fabric of their suits, keyhole-shaped eyes were still visible. It was said that the entities also lacked visible joints at their knees and elbows, which added to their mysterious appearance. The entities appeared to be engaged with the interior of the craft, with one seemingly opening a control panel. Upon noticing Esther's presence, one of the beings gestured to its companions, prompting a reaction. Another being, which had been collecting rock samples outside the craft, seized its activity and approached the luminous vehicle. Esther then considered approaching the craft for a closer examination. However, her dog, sensing danger, dissuaded her. Deciding to lure her brother Bill, she briefly returned home, and upon their return to the site, the craft had vanished without a trace. The following day, they both inspected the location where the craft had been. They discovered a rectangular burn mark on the grass, consistent with the dimensions and position of the UFO. This physical evidence suggested an intense heat exposure, similar to that experienced in forest fires or significant heat radiation. 4 months later, investigator William K. Allen confirmed the persistence of this anomalous ground marking, showing just how much the incident had a physical impact on the environment. Terrible Trolls of Sitting Mill. In 1975, Barry and Allen, a couple from Staffordshire, were returning home to Slitting Mill after a Christmas party with their young children asleep in their car. Their journey took an unexpected turn when their car engine stalled near the ancient stone house on the outskirts of their village. Barry's attempt to diagnose the problem revealed no apparent mechanical failures, leading him to consider fetching another car from home to transport his family because of the cold winter night. As Allen waited with the children, she screamed upon seeing a small, hairy humanoid dart across the road, followed by 2 more similar figures. These entities, about 4 feet tall and completely covered in hair, seemed to scrutinize the family from across the field before beginning to approach them, inducing sheer panic in Allen and concern in Barry for his children's safety. The couple then experienced a sudden lapse in memory, and the next thing they were aware of was that it was 2 hours later and the car started without issue. Something to note is the creatures also bore resemblance to folklore entities known as boggarts or bogles, commonly described in Staffordshire folklore. However, the family's encounter also shared the characteristics with extraterrestrial sightings, such as the sudden stalling of their car and the period of missing time, both common in UFO-related incidents. Flying monstrosity in Falls City. In Falls City, Richardson County, Nebraska, during the latter part of 1956, an encounter occurred involving John Hanks, which is a pseudonym for privacy. Basically, John Hanks found himself outdoors late at night when he encountered an entity that appeared to be sort of mechanical. The creature, which he described as standing 9 feet tall, bore wings with a span of about 15 feet. These wings, unlike those of any known bird or bat, were very metallic in nature, resembling aluminum, and seemed to be attached to the creature's body via some form of harness. At the center of its chest was a panel that Hanks believed might be used to control its flight, hinting at an intelligence or technology beyond ominous presence. The creature's physical features were equally disturbing though. It emitted a hissing sound that filled Hanks with dread. Its face, characterized by large, watery eyes, conveyed a sense of malice, while its skin was likened to battered brown leather. This combination of characteristics led Hanks to speculate that he might be in the presence of a being from a hellish realm. However, the encounter was really brief. The creature then quickly took to the air, disappearing into the night sky within seconds and leaving behind a witness grappling with the implications of what he had seen. This being, whatever its origins, didn't return to Falls City, leaving the incident as a solitary but still profoundly impactful event in the life of John Hanks. Haunted by the Closet Clown. In the late 1990s, specifically around 1999 or 2000 in central Ohio, a Reddit user known as UPunisherX2012 experienced an encounter with a clown-like entity in the safety of his own closet. The individual, during the time of the incident, found themselves in their bedroom, their attention inadvertently drawn to the closet after perceiving some movement within. Upon closer inspection, what was initially assumed to be an ordinary disturbance turned out to be a figure distinct in its typical clown clothing. It was subtly trying to blend in with the direction of the clothes hanging in the closet. Initially, the witness could not see a face or discern further details until the figure began to wave, revealing white gloves and initiating a movement of terror for the witness. This encounter would not remain isolated. 5 years later, the witness's younger brother experienced a similar, terrifying interaction with what was presumed to be the same entity. Distraught and crying, the young boy reported seeing a clown in the closet, unaware of his older brother's previous experience. Efforts to rationalize the encounters or attribute them to other family members or external factors yielded no further insights, leaving these interactions as isolated but deeply impactful moments of contact with the inexplicable entity. The house, otherwise devoid of paranormal activity, seemed to harbor this one specter that targeted the children of the family specifically. Headless Horror of the Highlands. In Scotland, within the boundary that divides North and South Morar, there's a hill known for being the haunted ground of a creature called a Kolan Gunshan, or headless body. This entity is said to lack a head and is covered in hair, resembling a humanoid. Local stories tell of its hostility, targeting individuals who dare to pass through its territory after sunset. The tale though becomes particularly grim with the story of a local man referred to here as MacDonald and his tragic loss. MacDonald, living close to this notorious hill, had an unexpected visit one winter evening from a distinguished guest. Needing more people to help entertain the guest, he sent his 18-year-old son to a nearby settlement called Bracora to invite some friends over. Despite his father's explicit instructions to avoid returning alone, especially to the area near the hill, the young man couldn't find his friends and decided to return home alone. The following day, signs of a violent struggle were evident near the hill, with stones displaced and an alarming amount of blood, but the young man was nowhere to be found. Shaken by his son's disappearance and determined to confront the creature believed to be responsible, MacDonald made a vow not to eat or drink until he had dealt with the monster. Despite pleas from his friends to avoid the hill, MacDonald ventured alone, as the creature was known to only show itself to individuals who were by themselves. As anticipated, the Kolan Gunshan appeared and interacted with MacDonald, who had come to seek revenge for his son. The creature tried to dissuade him, but MacDonald engaged in a physical struggle with it. This altercation led to stones being dislodged, some of which are said to be still in their disturbed positions today. MacDonald ended up managing to overpower the creature and was about to deliver a fatal blow when the monster pleaded for mercy, promising that as long as one of MacDonald's descendants remained in Morar, it would not show itself again. John Gregerson Campbell, who recorded this tale in the early 20th century, noted that there were still living relatives of MacDonald in Morar at the time, which he believed was why the creature had not been seen again. However, with no recent sightings reported, it's left to speculate whether the pact made by MacDonald with the Kolan Gunshan continues to keep the creature at bay, or if it simply vanished into the realm of legend and folklore. The VIP Werewolf of Orange. In the spring of 1982, Tessa Dick, a Chapman University student and the fifth ex-wife of the late novelist Philip K. Dick, experienced something utterly inexplicable in El Mondena, California, close to the community of Orange. While waiting at an intersection, Tessa encountered an anomaly that challenged her perception of reality. A black limousine pulled up beside her, and through the rear window, she observed what appeared to be a German Shepherd sitting in the backseat. This was no ordinary dog, however, as Tessa soon discovered that the dog appeared intelligent and well-groomed, exchanging smiles with Tessa. It presented a semblance of normalcy until it rested its arm on the window ledge, revealing a human-like hand with well-manicured coal-black nails. This revelation left Tessa in disbelief, as the dog's arm bore short black hair similar to that on the dog's front leg, yet its hand was hairless and unmistakably human in anatomy. The encounter left Tessa pondering the nature of what she had witnessed. Despite this surreal experience, Tessa noted that she did not feel threatened, but rather shocked and curious. She reflected on the incident's personal and intentional feel, especially given the creature's deliberate action of revealing its arm and the smirk that followed her shocked reaction. This mysterious figure then seemed to vanish as quickly as they appeared, leaving no trace but a lingering sense of wonder in Tessa's mind. Mike's Little Man. In Central Florida, a young boy named Mike, living in a rural area in a trailer, had an unforgettable encounter one night. From his bedroom, looking out into the backyard, which melded seamlessly into the woods beyond, Mike observed a really unusual sight. His home, a single wide trailer, sat quietly under the night sky, the backyard dimly lit by a single light pole, casting shadows on the surroundings, including a big palmetto bush and a clothesline visible from Mike's window. On this particular night, though, he was unable to sleep and driven by a child's curiosity. It said he was peering through his bedroom window blinds into the backyard. To his astonishment though, he spotted a small figure standing roughly 3 to 4 feet tall, engaged in an unknown activity by the palmetto bush. This figure, as described by Mike, seemed to be dressed in a sort of suit with a disproportionately large bald head that was pale in color. It was the figure's hands fidgeting around in the bushes that mainly caught Mike's attention, since it suggested that it was working on something. Mike simply just watched until the figure sensed his gaze and began to turn its head slowly towards him. Fearing what he might see, Mike quickly let go of his blinds and retreated to his bed, pondering his next move. After some time, curiosity overcame him and he peeked through the blinds once more. The figure was still there, continuing its mysterious task. However, as before, it soon noticed Mike watching and began to turn slowly towards him again, prompting Mike to release the blinds in fear once again. The thought of the figure standing darkly in front of his window if he looked again terrified Mike. Despite this, he mustered the courage for another glance. The figure was not directly in front of the window as he feared, but it began to turn its head more swiftly this time. Its face was smooth, devoid of a nose or mouth, and where its eyes should have been, there were 2 black hollow sockets. This sight sent Mike into a state of panic. He leaped from his bed, ran to his parents' room, avoiding passing directly by the back door where he feared the entity might be waiting. After convincing his parents to check outside, his stepdad found nothing, leaving Mike's encounter unconfirmed by his family. Later, Mike ventured outside to rationalize what he had seen, but found no explanation for the encounter. Creature of the nightclub. In New York, Dina visited Faluca Lounge to see a friend who was DJing. During the night, she met various individuals, including a woman accompanied by her boyfriend. This woman consistently complimented Dina's appearance and frequently touched her face, actions Dina found unusual and somewhat invasive. The woman's behavior and movements struck Dina as peculiar, especially her stiff, unnatural way of dancing. As the night progressed, Dina's discomfort grew, leading her to the dance floor in search of a distraction. However, the woman followed, dancing too closely for comfort, and at one point effortlessly spinning Dina around, despite Dina's considerable stability and the woman's seemingly slight frame. Suddenly, Dina experienced a sensation similar to an energy drain from her stomach and groin area, which caused her significant distress. Looking up, she witnessed a transformation in the woman's face, one side stretched unnaturally, her eyes glowing independently of the ambient light, signaling a departure from human norms. Realizing Dina could perceive her true form, the woman informed her boyfriend with the simple, "She can see." Panicked, Dina retreated upstairs to the DJ booth where her friends were seeking refuge. Despite initially doubting her account, Dina's friends became concerned when the woman and their boyfriend approached the booth, continuing their unsettling behavior. Dina decisively left the nightclub, but the encounter's aftermath lingered. The areas of her chin where the woman had touched developed an itchy, painful reaction, and Dina was left with enduring fear and anxiety. Dancing dolls from the dark. In Kansas, between 1961 and 1966, a family experienced something really extraordinary. MW and her little brother, who was albino and faced challenges due to scarlet fever at birth, shared a room in their grandmother's house. Their brother's condition made him sensitive to daylight, leaving him more active at night. Their room contained a walk-in closet from which, according to MW, unusual visitors would emerge after dark. Nightly, figures resembling life-size toys, a toy soldier with a drum, a Raggedy Ann doll, and a teddy bear would exit the closet and dance around the brother's crib. This silent spectacle unfolded consistently, with MW trying to ignore the scene by focusing on the flowered wallpaper of their room. This went on for about 2 years until her brother had to be moved to an institution because of difficulties in caring for him. MW believes her brother might have somehow brought these figures to life in his mind, seeking companionship in his isolated world. This experience sparked MW's lifelong interest in the paranormal, a curiosity that runs in her family. Despite this and other unusual occurrences she has encountered, none have frightened her as much as the dancing dolls did. Night Watchman by the Window. Vern Windsor's story begins in his early childhood, around the age of 5, in a small town where he first encountered what he would later refer to as the Night People. This experience wasn't a fleeting moment of childhood imagination, but actually a consistent series of encounters that spanned over a year. At that young age, Windsor thought the presence of these beings was a normal part of life, a division of the day between humans and another kind of entity that took over at night. It was only as he grew older that he came to understand the extraordinary nature of what he had been witnessing. The Night People, as Vern described them, appeared mostly human, with the notable exception of their abnormally large fish-like eyes. This feature alone set them apart from any ordinary human, suggesting something otherworldly or at least not fully human. Despite this, they engaged in surprisingly mundane activities. Vern recounted seeing them walk around his yard and even into his neighbors' properties, seemingly unnoticed by anyone but him. He watched them carry out ordinary tasks, like mowing the lawn, except there was no sound to accompany the actions. These beings weren't just passing through though, they behaved as if they were living out their daily lives under the cover of darkness. Vern's experiences weren't confirmed to a single location though. When his family moved from Oric to Liberty, Missouri, he noted that the Night People had followed them. This continuity suggested that whatever connection Vern had with these beings, it was tied to him personally rather than being bound to a specific geographic location. The phenomenon persisted, with the Night People continuing their silent nightly routines in this new setting. The turning point in Vern's encounters with the Night People though came when he decided to interact with them directly. Seeing nocturnal children playing in a neighboring yard, Vern ventured outside in hopes of joining them. This decision though marked a dramatic shift in his relationship with these entities. For the first time, he felt seen by them, a realization that filled him with dread. Following this attempted interaction, the Night People vanished from his life, never to be seen again by Vern. Nagua on the prowl. In the 1970s, a witness, likely a member of the military, and his friend set out for a drive towards the Joshua Tree National Monument, enjoying the cool desert air and an animated conversation. What was meant to be a leisurely drive though took a turn towards the uncanny when they encountered disturbances that would challenge their understanding of the natural world. The first sign of something amiss was a loud, repetitive knocking on the driver's side door, which prompted the witness to stop the car, suspecting they might have accidentally hit an animal. Finding nothing to explain the noise, they resumed their journey, only to experience the same unsettling noise, this time on the passenger side. Despite initial thoughts that it might be a car-related issue, such as a flat tire, a thorough check revealed nothing out of the ordinary. The situation escalated here when their car unexpectedly began to lose power, the lights went out, and it slowed to a halt. Seized by fear, the witness and his friend found themselves sitting in the dark, waiting for what would happen next. Then, just as suddenly, the car came back to life, its lights illuminating the road and revealing a chilling sight, being a creature crouched by the roadside near the passenger side of the car. Described as resembling a large dog with an oversized head, similar to the werewolf from the movie The Howling, the figure represented something straight out of a Hollywood horror film. This encounter set them into a state of panic, and the witness reacted by speeding away from the scene. As they fled, they saw the creature stand up on its hind legs and cross the road behind them, a behavior not characteristic of any known animal and more similar to the mythical or paranormal. Years later, the witness shared the story with a biology professor interested in cryptozoology, who suggested that they might have seen a Nagua, a shapeshifter from Mesoamerican folklore known for its ability to transform into animal forms. Derry's Frogman. On the night of September 10, 2018, in Derry Township, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, an unusual event unfolded. A man driving down a rural road amidst dark and rainy conditions encountered something extraordinary. About 75 feet ahead of his vehicle, illuminated by these headlights, appeared an anomaly that at first glance seemed to be merely a patch of fog. However, this was no ordinary mist. The entity in question quickly distinguished itself from the surrounding night. The witness described it as a foggy white form with a distinctly humanoid shape, standing between 6.5 to 7 feet tall. Despite his stooped posture, The figure's muscular shoulders and notably smaller waist were clear, suggesting a strength and formidability. The details of the head, arms, and legs, however, remained obscured, lending the figure an ethereal quality. For several seconds, the driver observed the entity as it moved across the road from left to right, entering a field where it then vanished from sight. The movement was described as almost floating, a detail that emphasized the spectral nature of the encounter, and no sounds or odors were associated with the sighting. This encounter took place in close proximity to Chestnut Ridge, a region already infamous for its association with various unexplained phenomena, including UFO sightings and Bigfoot encounters. Demonic Dwarves of the Copper Mine. In 1997, Dwan Berger, a 22-year-old outdoors enthusiast, and his friend Mark embarked on a camping trip near an abandoned copper mine in Arizona. As they settled in by their campfire, enjoying the quiet after a day of exploration, their peace was abruptly broken by screams echoing from the dark tunnel of the mine. The screams, suggesting distress and possibly torture, propelled Dwan and Mark from their campsite into a situation far beyond their wildest experiences. With no signs of other recent human activity in the area, Dwan and Mark speculated that someone might be living within the mine, subjecting others to unimaginable horrors. Armed with only steak knives, a tire iron, and a torch, they ventured into the mine, feeling courage and a need to intervene. Inside the mine, a bizarre scene unfolded. A greenish glow led them to encounter two short figures dressed in dark robes, initially mistaken for participants in a satanic ritual because of their appearance and the sinister atmosphere. However, as the two friends approached, they realized these were not ordinary humans, but rather beings barely reaching 5 feet in height, dwarfed by Dwan and Mark's taller stature. These beings spoke in unison with mechanical voices, a chilling warning for Dwan and Mark to leave or suffer the same fate as the unseen woman. When Dwan illuminated one of the figures with his flashlight, it revealed a mask and a visage that was not human, prompting an aggressive response from the entities. They wielded wand-like devices that emitted a yellow light, paralyzing Dwan and Mark temporarily. The beings then used their mysterious technology to open a doorway in the solid rock of the mine wall, disappearing into the darkness beyond. As quickly as they were paralyzed, Dwan and Mark found their mobility restored, though they were left with the lingering, tingling sensation. Realizing the gravity and the otherworldliness of their situation, Dwan and Mark decided to retreat. They extinguished their campfire and hastily left the area, grappling with the surreal encounter they had just experienced. In the aftermath, Dwan has reflected on the haunting screams they heard and the confrontation with the inexplicable beings. He contemplates the possibility that what they stumbled upon was not of this world or even a gateway to hell itself. The encounter has left him questioning the nature of their experience, whether it was an encounter with supernatural beings, aliens, or something even more sinister. Skinwalker Hit and Run. In 1990, Alex and his friends had an unusual experience while hunting in the White Mountains of northeastern Arizona. Alex, a quiet guy who was seen as trustworthy, wasn't known for making up stories. He and his friends had a tradition of going varmint hunting in these mountains, a place still wild and untouched. After high school, they took a break for a couple years because of jobs and college. But in 1990, they decided to meet up again for old times' sake. During their hunting trips, they used a spotlight to spot animals at night. This worked by catching the glow of the animals' eyes in the dark. Normally, they would see animals like wolves, coyotes, and deer. Coyotes, which can be hunted any time of the year without a permit, were often their targets. One night, they were using the spotlight and saw several animals. They managed to track a few coyotes with the light. Most of the coyotes, though, lost interest, but one of them kept following the light, even as the vehicle sped up to 35 miles per hour. Impressed by the coyote's persistence but noticing it was getting tired, they decided to end the chase and shoot the animal before it could escape into an abandoned coal mine at the end of the road. After shooting what they thought was a coyote, one of the hunters went to check the body. When he flipped it over, they all saw it wasn't a coyote, but looked like a young Native American boy wearing a coyote skin. They were shocked when this boy suddenly got up and ran into the forest, seemingly unharmed by the gunshot. Terrified by what they saw, the group quickly left the mountains and drove home, hearing coyotes howling as they left. This experience was so terrifying for them that two of the friends never wanted to go camping again, and none of them wanted to return to the White Mountains, especially at night. They felt that they had seen something supernatural, possibly a skinwalker, which is a creature from Navajo legend that can change its shape. The Arthurian Gargoyle. Colin Perks' life was deeply mixed with the legend of King Arthur, a fascination that began in his childhood and grew into a profound commitment. His home was filled with a vast collection of Arthurian literature, and was a testament to his dedication. Perks was convinced that the mythical King Arthur was rooted in historical truth, and that he was a real figure who exerted significant influence across ancient Britain during the late 5th and early 6th centuries. He believed Arthur's valiant resistance against the invading Germanic Saxons left an indelible mark on the country. This conviction led Colin to embark on a remarkable quest, being to locate the final resting place of King Arthur. Armed with clues derived from a series of complex codes and ciphers shared with him by another Arthurian researcher in 1978, Colin set his sights on Glastonbury. This historic town became the focus of his intense investigation. One evening in September of 2000, after a day spent digging in the woods near Glastonbury, Colin received a phone call that would steer his quest into uncharted territories. The caller was a woman with a disturbingly compelling voice, insisting on discussing his Arthurian studies. Despite the unnerving nature of the call, Colin agreed to meet her. The woman introduced herself as Sarah Key and met Colin at his doorstep. She presented an imposing figure dressed entirely in black. Despite her outward calm, Colin sensed an underlying hostility, a tension that filled the air with an almost tangible sense of dread. Sarah claimed to represent a secretive group within the British elite that had been closely monitoring Collins' activities. She demanded he cease his Arthurian investigations immediately, citing risks that Colin was initially quick to dismiss. However, his skepticism was shattered when Sarah detailed his recent activities with unnerving accuracy, revealing a level of surveillance that left Colin feeling exposed and vulnerable. The conversation took a darker turn when Sarah revealed the true nature of Arthur's grave. According to her, the burial site was constructed atop a portal or gateway to another dimension, a defense mechanism designed to prevent entities from this other world from entering ours. It was said that Collins' research, though well-intentioned, risked destabilizing this ancient safeguard, potentially unleashing paranormal forces upon the world. Despite Sarah's ominous warnings, though, Collins' resolve remained unshaken, a decision that would invite further encounters with the unknown. About 2 months later, Collins' journey took a terrifying turn when he faced a monstrous gargoyle on a deserted road. The creature, with his bat-like wings and glowing red eyes, appeared suddenly in front of his car, vanishing just as Colin attempted to run it over. The gargoyle's next appearance was even more personal and terrifying, though. Colin awoke one night to find the creature looming over him, with its grip paralyzing and its red eyes burning in the dark. The message was clear. Colin must abandon his quest for Arthur's grave. Though the gargoyle vanished, the encounter left Colin with a deep sense of unease, a feeling that this was no mere nightmare. Colin came to believe that Sarah Key and the gargoyle were one and the same, a supernatural shapeshifter with the ability to take on any form. Despite the harrowing experiences and the clear danger posed by his research, Colin continued his pursuit of the truth about King Arthur. Colin Perks lived the remainder of his days shadowed by the encounters with Sarah Key and the gargoyle, a man profoundly changed by his brush with the paranormal. His death in 2009, although attributed to a smoking habit, left those familiar with the story to wonder if there was more to his demise than meets the eye. Devil Dwarf of Remedios. On All Saints' Day, April 14, 1948, Jose Espinoza, a resident of Remedios, Cuba, decided to disregard his mother's advice not to work on a holy day, a time when people are encouraged to focus on worship without distractions. This day, traditionally known for its religious significance, was about to unfold a peculiar and unsettling event for Jose. Jose's intention was to prepare some cane carts for work later that day, a seemingly mundane task. Despite his mother's grave warning that the devil himself was said to roam freely on such sacred days, Jose proceeded with his plans, driven by a sense of routine or perhaps disbelief in such old wives' tales. As he climbed up to the first cart to begin his work, his attention was abruptly captured by an unusual presence on the fourth cart. There stood a diminutive humanoid entity, fiery red in color, measuring merely about 1.5 feet in height. The creature was not merely notable for its size and color, but for the sparks emanating from its horn-like protrusions and its tail. This devilish dwarf did not remain a silent observer for long though. Upon noticing Jose's shocked gaze, it engaged in a startling act of aggression. It somehow conjured a ball of fire, hurling it towards Jose. This act was not a singular display of its abilities though. The creature continued to roll larger and larger fireballs in Jose's direction, each narrowly missing him as he dodged in disbelief and growing terror. Jose, finding himself initially paralyzed by what he was witnessing, eventually broke free from his shock. He screamed out a realization that would chill any listener, being, "This is the devil." With that cry, he leaped from the car and made a desperate dash back to the safety of his home, not stopping until he was well beyond the reach of his furious assailant. Stalked by Demon Clown. During an Easter celebration at a local park filled with activities like egg hunts and cotton candy stands, a 7-year-old girl named Jem found herself drawn to a clown from whom she wanted a balloon animal. As she approached though, the lively atmosphere seemed to fade, leaving her feeling isolated with the clown. This wasn't the cheerful entertainer surrounded by children, but someone else entirely, exuding an unsettling aura. Jem noticed the clown's disheveled appearance and the smell of alcohol, a sharp contrast to the festive surroundings. Her initial eagerness for a balloon animal dissipated as the clown's grin made her uncomfortable, prompting her to retreat from the interaction. Despite moving on with the day's activities, Jem couldn't shake off the presence of the clown, who appeared to follow her around the park, remaining in her peripheral vision. Strangely, it seemed she was also the only one who could see him. This clown wasn't just out of place in his behavior, but also in his appearance, wearing a suit of white collar and red and white stripes, with his makeup exaggerated and his overall look unkempt. As the party came to an end and Jem headed home with her family, the clown seemed to follow, persisting in his silent pursuit. Her attempts to alert her family were in vain, since to them there was no clown, and attributed Jem's fear to an overactive imagination. Back at their apartment, the clown lingered outside, not daring to enter, but leaving Jem in a state of unease. She tried to distract herself with typical childhood activities, but the sense of dread lingered. Later that night, a startling discovery under her brother's bed confirmed her fears, being the clown with a menacing laugh and his tongue out, lurking. In a panic, she sought refuge with her mother, witnessing the clown's shadow by the door before screaming dispelled the haunting figure. Don't trust the pansy flowers. In 1967, Mike McDonald, then about 4 years old, experienced an incident that would remain vividly in his memory for a long time. This encounter occurred in a cave and involved an entity that McDonald could best describe as resembling a very large pansy flower, complete with features that suggested eyes positioned in a way that was strikingly reminiscent of the face seen on the cover of Whitley Strieber's Communion. During this encounter, although the pansy-like entity didn't verbally communicate, McDonald felt an overwhelming sense of being conveyed to by the entity with what he interpreted as a form of extreme intelligence and a sense of control over the situation. This interaction left him feeling as if the entity held a position of undeniable authority, displaying neither malice nor benevolence, but a detached dominion that was more disconcerting to McDonald than any display of hostility might have been. And adding to the complexity of the situation was the presence of McDonald's father, a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who stood beside him during the encounter. His father appeared despondent and possibly ashamed, emotions that profoundly impacted McDonald. Seeing his father, who he viewed as a figure of strength and authority, rendered so powerless and vulnerable, was more terrifying to him than the entity itself. Following the encounter, McDonald's recollections abruptly ended, leaving more questions than answers. When he later inquired with his father about the event, hoping perhaps for validation or explanation, his father professed no memory of the occurrence. This lack of confirmation from his father led McDonald to question the nature of the experience. Was it a dream, a false memory, or something more profound? Feline fiend frightens fishing first graders. In the summer of 1980 in Ashford, Washington, Chris, a 12-year-old boy at the time, and his cousin Eric, of similar age, set out for a day of trout fishing in a creek about 2 miles from their home. The tranquility of their fishing expedition, though, was abruptly shattered by the appearance of an entity that couldn't be explained. As they prepared their fishing gear beside the creek, Chris noticed what he initially mistook for a bear on the opposite bank, about 40 feet away. This creature was observed rubbing its back against a tree stump, which is a behavior not common for bears. However, the assumption of encountering a bear was quickly dispelled when the creature stood upright, revealing its form to be that of a humanoid standing between 6 to 7 feet tall, with a shoulder width of about 3 feet. This being was covered in well-groomed brown hair across his body, save for its face, which bore shorter, blonde hair. Notably, its head was covered with a blonde, lion-like mane, which was really unusual since it blended both human and feline characteristics. The face of the creature was flat with a human-like nose and eyes, though Chris could not discern its mouth, likely because it was obscured by its facial hair. Despite the detailed observation, Chris did not notice any defining muscles or genitals, suggesting a slender physique. The creature's arms were also human-like in proportion, not abnormally long, with hands that Chris could not recall having claws or fingernails. This brief encounter lasted only about 10 to 15 seconds and ended with Chris and Eric abandoning their fishing gear and fleeing the scene. But this encounter was not the end of Chris's experiences with such entities. Years later, at the age of 18, while camping with his girlfriend, Chris witnessed a large, hairy silhouette passing between their tent and the campfire. The silhouette appeared to interact with the tent, running what was presumed to be a finger along its top. The disturbance prompted Chris and his girlfriend to hastily abandon their campsite. And a further encounter occurred when Chris was 27. He and a friend stumbled upon what appeared to be a makeshift shelter in the forest, constructed from large timbers and featuring a pine needle floor. Despite the curiosity such a structure might normally elicit, an unsettling feeling urged them to leave the area swiftly. These incidents, which spread over Chris's life, suggest a recurring presence or interest of these feline-like entities in its vicinity. The initial encounter particularly stands out because of the detailed description of the creature and the context in which it occurred, being a peaceful fishing trip transformed into a moment of surreal confrontation with the unknown. Fire and brimstone in Bracken County. On the night of February 13, 1866, in Bracken County, Kentucky, Nathaniel G. Squires and his wife were suddenly awakened from their sleep by a loud commotion coming from the direction of the slave quarters on their plantation. Concerned and curious about the source of the disturbance, they hurried to investigate, expecting to find a fire or some other disaster. What they encountered, though, was far beyond what they expected. In the backyard, near the fence separating the house from the slave quarters, was a creature that was described as being almost as tall as the cabin itself. The entity bore a striking resemblance to an ape, but with some distinctive features, like a head with 2 small white horns protruding above its eyes and long arms covered in grayish hair. And the Squires family, including their daughters who joined them upon hearing the uproar, watched in horror as the creature was suddenly enveloped in a spiral column of flame that reached high into the trees, obscuring it from view. And as quickly as the flames had appeared, they dissipated, taking the monstrous figure with them. The slaves in the quarters, having been closest to the creature, were understandably in a state of extreme terror, with 2 individuals, an elderly woman and a young boy, reportedly driven to insanity by the sight. Musical Menace of Marcahuasi. Dr. Raul Rios Centeno, a medical doctor from Lima, Peru, who also delves into investigating unexplained phenomena, encountered a patient with an extraordinary story linked to a condition that baffled medical understanding. The patient, suffering from partial paralysis, exhibited symptoms of hemiplegia, a condition where one side of the body is paralyzed, which typically results from significant brain trauma. However, after conducting a thorough examination, including a CAT scan and an EAG, Dr. Centeno found no physical anomalies in her brain that could account for her condition. The scans showed no signs of swelling, discoloration, or bleeding, and the EEG indicated a lack of electrical activity in the left hemisphere of her brain, which was perplexing given the absence of any discernible brain damage. The patient's story began when she was camping with friends near the Marcahuasi Stone Forest, a location known for its ancient and mysterious stone formations, which some believe to be connected to prehistoric civilizations or extraterrestrial activities. During their campout, the group was drawn towards a small stone cabin by the sound of music that seemed to emanate from within. This cabin, illuminated by torches and visible in the night, seemed out of place in time. Upon approaching the cabin, the patient described feeling an unusual coldness, but was driven by curiosity to look inside through an open doorway. There, she witnessed a group of figures dressed in 17th century attire, dancing in a scene that seemed completely anachronistic. However, the moment she attempted to enter, a friend quickly pulled her away from the doorstep, and it was at this instant that she experienced a sudden and complete paralysis on one side of her body. Dr. Centeno listened to this account with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. The patient's physical symptoms were real, yet the cause appeared to transcend conventional medical understanding. Following her encounter near the Makawasi stone formations, she underwent intensive rehab at a national hospital in Lima, attempting to recover from the unexplained paralysis. The story also caught the attention of Scott Corrales, an investigator into unexplained phenomenon, who speculated that the patient might have experienced a time slip or inadvertently crossed into another dimension. This theory suggests that certain locations on Earth might act as portals to other times or dimensions, a concept that is a staple of science fiction but remains speculative in the context of established science. Rob's wardrobe rigoletto. Rob, a man from Sydney, Australia, shared a haunting memory from his childhood on the Strange Matters podcast. When he was 6 years old, Rob and his parents returned home from dinner to find their front door tampered with and their house in disarray, as though ransacked by burglars. The scene was one of chaos, with the furniture overturned, a vase shattered, and picture frames scattered across the floor. In the midst of their shock and confusion, Rob's father took it upon himself to search the house for any remaining threats while Rob and his mother waited, enveloped in anxiety. Despite his father's assurance that the house was clear, the invasion had left Rob deeply unsettled, compelling the family to spend the night together in the parents' bedroom, the only room left untouched by the intruder. As they settled in for the night, with Rob's parents softly conversing in the bathroom's glow, a sequence of really strange events unfolded. The family's large closet began to creak open, revealing in the dim light the long, white-gloved fingers of someone or something hidden within. What emerged was the figure of a clown, tall and imposing, dressed in a polka dot suit with pink frizzy hair and a painted white face. The surreal sight of this clown squatting inside the closet as if waiting for the right moment to reveal itself was enough to paralyze Rob with fear. The clown then signaled for silence with the finger to his lips, then proceeded to step out the closet, closing the door behind him. The figure was massive, nearly reaching the ceiling, and moved with exaggerated, stealthy steps across the bedroom, all the while maintaining eye contact with Rob and gesturing for silence. This bizarre visitor then walked past Rob's unsuspecting parents and exited the bedroom, leaving no trace of his presence except for a terrified child, too shocked to speak. The following morning, when Rob tried to explain the night's events, his parents dismissed the story as a dream. Yet, for Rob, the memory of that night is as vivid and chilling as ever, a stark reminder of the unexplained phenomenon that lurks on the edges of her reality. Grinning Goat Man of White Rock Lake. White Rock Lake, situated on the outskirts of Dallas, Texas, is a suburban oasis and is divided between state park territory in the north and lakefront estates in the south. This setting, however, harbors tales of encounters with the Goat Man, who disrupts the peaceful atmosphere with his presence. Reports from visitors, mainly picnicking couples, recount disturbing incidents of the Goat Man hurling large tires and other objects at those it appears to disdain. In August of 2000, Sandy Grace had a particularly vivid encounter with this creature while jogging around the lake's 9-mile trail at around 2 p.m. Moments before the sighting, Grace was suddenly seized by an overwhelming sense of dread, a feeling she had never encountered before. This fear intensified as the creature emerged from the dense forest adjacent to the trail. Grace described seeing a large humanoid figure covered in thin, coarse brown hair advancing towards her. The most striking features of this being were the two large horns protruding from its forehead and the unsettling grin that seemed to stretch across its face as it approached. However, when it got to within approximately 15 feet of her, the creature astonishingly crouched down on all fours and vanished in a flash of light, leaving Grace in a state of shock and confusion. Reflecting on the encounter, Grace was certain that what she saw was not a figment of her imagination, but struggled to reconcile her experience with any known natural phenomenon. Nick Redfern, who documented Grace's account, noted the similarity between her sudden onset of terror and the panic in the woods phenomenon, historically associated with the presence of Pan, the ancient Greek god of wild places. Gatorman, a scientist, confronts the monstrous. Between 2010 and 2013, a zoology scholar from Florida experienced a series of encounters with a creature that seemed to be straight out of cryptid legend. Living near the St. Johns River Delta, which is an area that has a lot of wildlife and linked to numerous unexplained sightings, this individual was no stranger to the natural inhabitants of Florida's ecosystems. However, what he encountered that day transcended his understanding of local fauna. In March of 2010, while engaging in his routine activities along the river, the witness came across a manatee displaying unusual injuries. Unlike the typical scars from boat propellers, this manatee bore deep, U-shaped bite marks indicative of an attack by a large predator. Given the size and resilience of manatees, very few creatures can inflict such wounds, suggesting that there is a presence of an unknown and powerful entity in the waters. Months later, while exploring a secluded island with friends, the sense of being watched pervaded his experience. The absence of birds, normally abundant in such locales, and the discovery of unnaturally broken branches and slide marks along the beach further fueled his unease. This sensation of an unseen presence would become a hauntingly familiar feeling in subsequent encounters. The most harrowing experience occurred in June of 2011 during a camping trip with his Boy Scout troop. Venturing alone into a swath of marshland as dusk approached, the forest's natural chorus fell silent around him. It was then that he glimpsed a dark figure lurking in the waters. The creature, partially obscured yet unmistakably large and ominous, seemed to be stalking him through the swampy terrain. By April of 2013, the witness decided to venture into a familiar inlet, a spot often frequented by manatees. The tranquility of the scene, though, was shattered when an unseen entity collided with his kayak. This encounter was unlike any previous wildlife interaction, since the creature beneath the water was massive, with physical characteristics that defied identification as any known species. In a desperate attempt to escape, he paddled to shore, only to witness the creature emerge from the water. The being he described bore an uncanny resemblance to ancient reptilian predators, yet walked on its hind legs and exhibited a level of intelligence and curiosity beyond mere animalistic instinct. Spaceman in Saint Cyrille. The early hours of June 25, 1974, in Saint Cyrille de Wendover, Quebec, Mr. L was drawn outside by an unusual thumping noise. When he went to check out what it was a reddish object, unidentified, and hovering close to the ground near the mobile home. This object, domed in shape with red and white lights at the top and surrounded by oval-shaped white lights at its base, cast yellow beams onto the ground, creating a really weird scene. Compelled to share this unbelievable sight, Mr. L woke his wife. Together, they were soon distracted by a buzzing sound that heralded the arrival of something even more astonishing, being humanoid entities mere feet from their window. The entities, described as 6 feet tall, stiff-moving, and resembling robots, sparked a lot of fear and curiosity in the couple. Seeking safety, yet unable to turn away, Mr. and Mrs. L observed from their living room as the beings inspected a nearby trailer. Throughout the night, they counted up to 15 of these mysterious visitors. The entities, lined up parallel to a creek adjacent to the mobile home, displayed no discernible facial features. Their chests glowed with red bars, which was likened to the elements of a toaster. Also, these beings didn't walk but seemed to float above the ground. The departure of the UFO and its crew was not documented in the reports available. The immediate aftermath of the encounter focused on the investigation of the site, which yielded interesting evidence but no conclusive answers. Investigators found tripod-like imprints and 3 ring-shaped nests in the grass on the creek's far side, suggesting a landing or at least a physical presence of the craft. Also, a strange white substance, likened to plastic and possibly related to the entities, was found where the beings had been observed. Subterranean Centaur Scare. On March 7, 1913, in the Chickasaw mine of Kittanning, Pennsylvania, miners faced a really weird event that would leave a mark on their memories. The day started like any other, with workers busy with their tasks. Suddenly though, the mine's atmosphere shifted from mundane to mysterious as an unusual sound pierced the subterranean silence. Described retrospectively by those present, this sound resembled violent hoofbeats accompanied by ghostly light, which then led to the arrival of a figure. This figure, an apparition unlike any known creature, commanded the miners to abandon their tools and flee the mine. In its hand, it held an object similar to a dinner pail, from which emanated an eerie light, illuminating its spectral form. John Martle, the mine mortar's driver, found himself directly in the path of the spectre. It appeared suddenly, pointing a bony finger at him and uttering a single command, "Go." Martle was initially frozen in fear, but the instinct to survive soon propelled him into action. He then fled, hearing the creature pursue him in the mine motor. The miners collectively refused to return to work the following day, deeply shaken by the encounter. The incident ended up leaving many questions unanswered, not least how a figure so rude in ancient stories found its way into their mine. The appearance of the centaur was seen as an ill omen and casted a long shadow over the Chickasaw mine. Investigations that followed found no physical evidence of the centaur's visit, such as footprints owing to its reported method of locomotion, floating above the ground. However, investigators discovered tripod-like imprints and ring-shaped depressions in the grass across the creek, possibly marking where the UFO that brought this being had landed. Also, a strange substance likened to plastic and perhaps related to the centaur or its craft was found at the site. Rat of El Bombero. In February 2004, in Barrio Santa Teresita, a neighborhood experienced a series of unsettling events centered around Leña knives. The disturbances began with the phenomenon where stones appeared to rain down on her house. Leña claimed to see an entity which she and others later associated with El Bombero, a figure from local folklore. This entity was said to be small, humanoid, and capable of becoming invisible. The situation escalated when Leña ventured into a wooden area near the houses to find the source of the stone throwing. She disappeared briefly, causing alarm among her neighbors. When a local man found her, Leña was injured with significant damage to her face, suggesting that she'd been attacked. Despite the presence of multiple witnesses, only Leña could see her assailant, describing it as a small, dark figure that physically assaulted her and threatened to take her away. This attack led to a broader panic in the neighborhood. At one point, Leña collapsed in her home, claiming that the unseen entity was pulling at her feet. Despite her family and neighbors' efforts to help, including striking at the air with machetes of hitting the invisible attacker, Leña continued to be tormented. The police were then called and she was eventually taken to a psychiatric ward for treatment. The community responded by seeking spiritual support. A local deacon visited, offering prayers and blessings in an attempt to protect the neighborhood from further disturbances. Leña's brother, Mario Obregon, noted that the creature repeatedly targeted Leña despite attempts to guard her. Neighbors who tried to intervene with the religious symbols and prayers reported that these actions only seemed to provoke the entity further. These series of events culminated in a heightened state of fear within the community, with many convinced that a supernatural force was at work, specifically targeting Leña. Wondrous Wraith of Willow Creek. In 1968, a tobacco merchant was traveling home late at night on a country road in Bracken County, Kentucky. As he hurried along the dark road, his journey was abruptly interrupted by a sight really bizarre. Standing in the middle of the road was a creature that had elements of both a man and a horse, like a centaur. It was around 6 feet tall, with a human-like torso and the lower body of a horse. Its face was very pale, almost ghostly, and it had flames where one might expect to see hair. The creature's eyes were also a sulphurous blue, changing in size from moment to moment, and it breathed fire in the way that resembled a clock's pendulum. In its hands, the creature wielded a torch and a sword about 4 feet long. Despite its fearsome appearance though, it didn't attack the merchant. Instead, after making its presence known, it stepped aside and disappeared into the night. The merchant then spurred his horse forward to pursue the creature. However, despite reaching the place where it had vanished, he found nothing. When he looked back, the creature had returned to its original spot on the road. This encounter prompted a group of local citizens to form a search party. Upon reaching the site of the setting, the group experienced mixed results. Some saw the creatures, while to others it remained invisible. The creature was observed running back and forth on a fence before finally vanishing around 11 p.m. From that night onwards, the creature was reported to appear at the same time each night, causing a mixture of excitement and anxiety among the locals. Spring Hill Jack drives 4 Italian soldiers insane. In December 1919, the quiet town of Castelfranco Veneto, near the castle of Gadego in Italy, became the center of an inexplicable series of events that would terrify the local military personnel. The castle, a significant arsenal and gunpowder storage site, was suddenly left without its guards, who fled in fear because of the repeated appearances of a mysterious apparition during the night. The incident began when a soldier on duty guarding the magazine reported seeing a luminous humanoid figure emitting flames from its head about 20 feet away from his position. The alarming sight prompted the sentinel to alert his fellow guards, who rushed to the scene only to find the specter had vanished. However, the apparition was not done. It soon reappeared, causing the entire company of soldiers to open fire on it. Despite their efforts, the figure dissolved into a ball of flame and then disappeared into the air, leaving behind no evidence of its existence. The following night, the entity returned with the same fiery display. This time, a Sicilian soldier and several comrades attempted to confront the being with bayonets, but their attacks passed through it as if it were made of air. Once again, the apparition vanished, leaving behind only a fiery halo that dissipated into the night. And the encounters with the spectral figure had a profound and immediate effect on the soldiers. Fear and hysteria gripped the unit, prompting all guards to abandon their posts, leaving the place unprotected. In response to the crisis, a dozen officers volunteered to stand guard over the arsenal until a formal investigation could be launched. However, the aftermath of the encounter took a more serious toll on the mental health of 4 soldiers who were driven to insanity by the events. They were subsequently confined to the military asylum, unable to cope with the reality of what they had witnessed. The community of Castelfranco Veneto was also left in a state of nervous anticipation, with the nightly visits from the apparition becoming a regular occurrence. The entity's appearance were both consistent and perplexing, manifesting every night at the same time, performing its inexplicable actions before vanishing as mysteriously as it had appeared. Scotney Castle's Dripping Man. Scotney Castle, located southeast of Lamberhurst in Kent, features 2 distinct architectural entities: the older, moated manor house known as Scotney Old Castle, situated on an island within a small lake, and a more recent structure, Scotney New Castle, erected by Edward Hussey in 1843. This newer construction was intended to serve as a replacement for the aging ancestral home. The Darrow family, who held ownership of the estate for over 3 centuries, are central to one of the castle's most intriguing narratives, especially relating to Arthur Darrow, a figure who is shrouded in the lore of smuggling and mystery. Arthur Darrow's story is mixed with Scotney Castle's history, primarily because of his alleged involvement in smuggling activities. It's said that upon discovery of his illicit endeavors by a revenue officer, Darrow resorted to murder, disposing of the officer's body in the castle's moat to safeguard his secret. Subsequently, Darrow purportedly faked his own death, convincing others of his demise abroad. During his own funeral, Atal recounts the appearance of a tall stranger in a black cloak who whispered to a mourner, "That is me they think they are burying," before vanishing, suggesting Darrow's intent to continue his life of crime elsewhere. Rumors bolstered by the exhumation of Darrow's supposed coffin in 1924, which was found to contain stones instead of a body. And it's this that sets the stage for the phenomenon of the Dripping Man, a ghostly apparition believed to be the spirit of the murdered revenue officer. Visitors to Scotney Castle have reported sightings of a figure, drenched and draped in pondweed, emerging from the moat and staggering towards the castle's front door, where it's said to pound on the door in a chilling display of seeking retribution against Arthur Darrow. And in a modern twist to the castle's haunted reputation, a narrative shared by a teacher recounts the experience of German tourists who, mistaking the ghostly apparition for a drowning man, were reportedly shocked by the apparent indifference of bystanders. This incident highlights the strong belief in the ghost's existence, so much so that the Natural Trust, which manages the property, has had to clarify the legend to visitors to prevent misunderstandings and potentially dangerous rescue attempts. Werewolf on Hollowed Ground. In a Midwestern Baptist church near a small town bordered by rivers and a lake, an extraordinary event unfolded in 1992, witnessed by hundreds during a Sunday worship service. This incident involves a sudden and alarming transformation of a woman into a monstrous entity, which has since been a subject to investigation by cryptozoological investigator Linda Godfrey. Because of the sensitivity of their experience, the witnesses, a couple named Ken and Sarah, which are pseudonyms, requested anonymity. Their credibility is supported by multiple interviews and verification of details by Godfrey. Ken, a Vietnam veteran with a long career in construction, and Sarah, a part-time church maintenance worker, provided a first-hand account of the event. The incident occurred when a middle-aged woman, described as new to the church and sitting about 10 feet away from Ken and Sarah, suddenly stood up during the service and transformed into a creature with a canine face, deer-like hooves, and a body covered in gray hair. The transformation, according to witness descriptions, occurred without any visible transition sequence, and the woman's clothes disappeared in the process. The creature, described as having a baboon-like face rather than a wolf's, displayed solid black eyes and teeth that had grown 4 inches. Ken and Sarah's testimonies detailed the creature's behavior as it emerged, noting its protective stance and the palpable sense of fear it exuded. The congregation was paralyzed with fear, resorting to prayer in response to the beast's menacing presence. The minister's attempt to confront the creature by declaring it had no authority in the church led to a tense standoff, with the entity ultimately subdued and vanishing just as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the woman in her original form. Following the incident, the church experienced poltergeist activity. One unsettling event occurred when Sarah found her butcher knife balanced in an unnaturally precise manner, suggesting a continuation of supernatural disturbances within the church. Ken's experiences in Vietnam with rock apes, cryptids known locally as Batatut, provided him with a point of comparison for the church incident, though he ultimately concluded what he witnessed was a demonic possession. This event led to significant changes within the congregation and the church's leadership, with many involved preferring to remain silent about the occurrence, likely because of the fear and confusion it had caused. Why don't talk to glowing chameleons anymore? Luke Payne shares a memory from his childhood that involves an incident where an entity that looked much like a chameleon. This event occurred when Luke was just 5 years old. He, along with his family, encountered this being during a car ride. The details about what was communicated during this encounter, though, remain fuzzy in Luke's memory. He recalls that the chameleon conveyed some information, either to him directly or to his entire family, but the exact content of this message has become unclear over time. The significance of this encounter became evident the next day, though. Luke revealed to his mother and grandmother details about something he couldn't have known through normal means. When he questioned how he came by this information, Luke, without hesitation, attributed it to the chameleon they met the previous night. His explanation, however, was met with disbelief. Both his mother and grandmother had no memory of such an encounter, which left them baffled and likely concerned about the origins of Luke's newfound knowledge. This experience has lingered in Luke's mind since, unlike other kids who might have imaginary friends or engage in creative play, Luke insists that his encounter with the glowing chameleon didn't fit into these categories. He admits that only a few other events in his life could be considered remotely similar in strangeness. This leads him to contemplate the reliability of human memory and perception, suggesting that this incident might be a screen memory. Screen memories are a psychological phenomenon where a person's mind masks a disturbing or significant experience with a more mundane or bizarre memory, possibly indicating that what Luke remembers as an encounter with the chameleon might be a placeholder for something else, potentially more unsettling. Yet, Luke also entertains the idea that perhaps the giant glowing chameleon genuinely took an unusual interest in his family's affairs for reasons unknown, which is why he jests about no longer communicating with such creatures. Zook and Alux. In 1977, at the historic site of Miapan, Zook, the caretaker of these ruins, found himself in an event that would challenge the boundaries of his understanding of reality. Miapan, known for its ancient grandeur and as a beacon of the Mayan civilization, was where Zook performed his nightly duties, ensuring the preservation and safety of this slice of history. It was during one of these routine evenings that the silence was pierced by unknown sounds near the Temple of the Birds, drawing Zook's attention and curiosity. Initially attributing the noise to a possible intruder, given that the site closed to visitors at 5 p.m., Zook ventured towards the source of the sounds. His approach was cautious, with anticipation of confronting a wayward tourist or even just a local out of place. However, the reality that unfolded before him was far from anything he could anticipate. As he navigated the temple, a small clay pellet whizzed past him, narrowly missing his head, and marked the beginning of an onslaught. Taking refuge behind a pile of debris, Zook was subjected to a barrage of similar projectiles, each striking the ancient stones with a lot of force. The pause in the assault allowed Zook a moment to glimpse his assailant, revealing a small humanoid figure in the moonlight with mythical features. This being, which was not much larger than a child, but with the distinct appearance of an adult, had a disproportionately large head and was covered in a white hue-pill, suggesting a connection to traditional Mayan attire. Also, it wielded a machete almost as tall as the figure itself. The events that followed this encounter are pretty much mysterious though, and up to speculation, with the immediate reaction of Zook lost to time. Whether he fled in fear or stood in awe is a detail that's left unrecorded, but the impact of the incident was so profound enough to draw him back to the scene the following day. Compelled by a need to validate his experience, Zook collected the clay pellets that had been hurled at him, finding them hardened to a degree that likened them to bullets. This story, first brought to light by Bill Mack in Fate magazine and later recounted in Lost Cities of North and South America by David Hatcher Childress, presents Zook as an actual credible and personable witness. Calama Crater. On September 15, 1999, in Calama, Chile, Enrique Fowler and his grandson John parked their truck at their home on Yerbas Buena Street. But the tranquility of the evening was shattered when, in the glare of the truck's headlights, an unusual figure emerged. This entity, which standed only about a meter tall, bore the appearance of being part ape and part something else entirely. Initially noticed for its dirty gray fur and bipedal stance, the creature quickly turned its upper body to face Enrique and Jean, revealing more of its weird features. The creature's face, which was gray and covered with large, almond-shaped eyes that shone in the darkness, became a focus of their terror. Its small mouth opened and closed rhythmically, suggesting exhaustion, while its body had a rounded torso with a noticeably short neck. Sparse tufts of hair on its head and a longer, scruffy beard also added to its odd appearance. Following this brief observation though, the creature executed a leap of 3 meters, disappearing into the night. Enrique and Jean, paralyzed by fear, remained in the safety of their truck for an additional 15 minutes before daring to exit. The aftermath of this encounter was not only psychological but also physical, as both developed severe skin allergies. Tragically, Enrique passed away from a heart attack a little over a year later, an event that some speculate may have been related to this experience. Its description also shares some similarities with the chupacabra, a cryptid known for its kangaroo-like leaps and distinctive eyes, so it's speculated that it could have been that. Bush that walked away. In the autumn of 1976, a high school sophomore named Robert had recently joined the Reserve Officers' Training Corps. Robert's initiation to the group necessitated his assignment to guard duty, isolating him in a quarter mile from camp near an old barn, a post he took up around 3 a.m. About 30 minutes into his watch, Robert observed what appeared to be a bush situated about 100 yards from his position, swaying back and forth despite the absence of wind. This anomaly, though initially not a concern, and he continued to monitor its movement over the next quarter hour, noting its persistent sway. The ordinary nature of the night took a turn though towards the extraordinary when the bush abruptly assumed a bipedal stance and walked away. This revelation, so startling in its deviation from the natural order, elicited a scream from Robert, propelling him back to the camp in a state of shock. His claim was that this figure was not only mobile, but possessed a stature surpassing that of a typical human, both in height and build. The response from the cadet group, roused by Robert's scream and subsequent tale of a mobile bush, was to investigate the area he had described. Their search, however, yielded no concrete evidence of the walking bush or any clues to its nature or whereabouts. The possibility that this incident was just Robert's imagination was spurred by fatigue and the stress of the training, which cannot be dismissed outright. The human mind is capable of conjuring vivid illusions under stress or in states of heightened alertness. Yet, the duration and detail of the encounter suggest an experience that was more than a mere hallucination. An alternative explanation, though, speculates that the event could have been a prank orchestrated by another cadet, possibly utilizing a suit to create the appearance of a bush. This theory, though, is left without direct evidence to support it. Sheep Killer by Potosí. In the village of Potosí, Bolivia, during the spring of 1968, Valentina Flores, a shepherdess, found herself face to face with what would later be described as an aggressive extraterrestrial being. Basically, as she was preparing to herd her sheep and llamas back to the stable for the evening, her routine was abruptly interrupted. In one of the pens, Valentina noticed a small figure about 1.2 meters tall engaged in an act of violence upon her sheep. Initially mistaking it for a human thief because of its size, she soon realized that the figure was unlike any person she had encountered. The entity was described as wearing a dark colored jumpsuit and a helmet with dark glass, obscuring its face and rendering its expressions invisible to Valentina. It even wielded an oblong tool with a hook at the end, which it used to mutilate the sheep, opening the abdomen and removing the entrails with precision. In a defensive response, Valentina began throwing stones at the intruder, an act of resistance against what she perceived as a direct threat to her livelihood. This creature, however, exhibited a remarkable ability to counteract this resistance by using its weapon in a way that resembled a boomerang, returning its hand after each throw. This action caused Valentina not only minor injuries and scratches, but showed the technological superiority of the aggressor. Despite her efforts, the entity showed no signs of pain or deterrence, meaning it had either a high tolerance for physical harm or a protective barrier against the makeshift projectiles. Eventually, though, the creature retreated to an unidentified object on 4 legs, resembling a box, where it appeared to manipulate its tool to retract a net made of a material similar to plastic, which had been suspended above the creature during its attack. This act of retraction was followed by the humanoid collecting the sheep's entrails into a bag, which was then stored in a backpack-like device. Astonishingly, this device then enabled the entity to ascend into the air and vanish over the horizon, leaving behind a scene of carnage and one bewildered witness. The aftermath of this incident left 34 sheep dead and raised numerous questions about the motivations and origins of the creature. Valentina's experience predates the widespread phenomenon of animal mutilations associated with extraterrestrial theories, suggesting a potential early encounter with beings beyond our understanding. Ghosts who needed a shave. In the midst of the 19th century gold rush that transformed the landscape and fortunes of British Columbia, the town of Barkerville emerged as a bustling hub of activity and ambition. Named after Billy Barker, one of the fortunate miners to strike gold in the region, Barkerville was basically the era's mix of hope, hardship, and the relentless pursuit of wealth. Despite the challenges posed by fires and economic downturns, the town persisted through the decades, its population waxing and waning with the fortunes extracted from the earth. By the late 19th century, however, the once thriving community began to decline, and though it experienced a temporary revival during the Great Depression, Barkerville eventually faded into history, with its preserved remains now serving as a testament to the Caribou Gold Rush era. Among the many tales, though, that linger in the shadow of Barkerville's history, one particular account stands out as a humanoid encounter. The story unfolds in 1866, during the town's golden years, with Wellington Donnelly Moses, a successful black barber who split his time between Barkerville and New Westminster to escape the harsh Canadian winters. It was in New Westminster that Moses befriended a young American, Morgan Blessing, and together, along with a Texan gambler named James Berry, they journeyed north to the Caribou goldfields in the spring of 1866. However, the bond between Moses and Blessing soon fractured under Berry's influence, leading Moses to proceed alone to Barkerville. In time, only Berry would follow, appearing in Barkerville markedly wealthier and without Blessing. When Moses inquired about the mutual friend, Berry denied any knowledge of Blessing's whereabouts, which sparked Moses' suspicions. As fate would have it, on a sweltering day on June 1866, Moses encountered Blessing once more, or so it seemed. Entering Moses' barbershop, Blessing appeared not as the friend Moses remembered, but as a ghostly figure, his clothes moldy, his beard matted, and his visage pale and lifeless. Without a word, Blessing sat down for a shave, and as Moses prepared to attend to him, he noticed a towel around Blessing's head soaking with blood, a silent testament to the young man's grim fate. In that moment, Blessing vanished, leaving Moses with the chilling realization that his friend had met a violent end, likely at the hands of James Barry. Driven by the spectral visitation, Moses reported his suspicions to the authorities, but without tangible evidence, they could do little. It wasn't until September 22, 1866, that a shallow grave at Beaver Pass revealed the truth. The body of Morgan Blessing, with a bullet hole in his skull, confirmed Moses' fears and implicated Barry, who was found to possess a distinctive gold nugget scarf pin known to belong to Blessing. Barry was then arrested, tried, and eventually hanged for his crime, bringing some justice for Blessing, thanks in part to the ghostly intervention that alerted Moses to his friend's tragic demise. Arrington Woods Golden Men. On January 1st, 2018, in Arrington Woods near New Markshy, North Yorkshire, a woman walking her dog encountered two small, hairy humanoid figures. These figures, about 3 feet tall, were observed near a fallen tree, engaged in what sounded like conversation in an unidentified language that reminded the witness of ape-like chatter. The creatures were covered in tawny hair, with one appearing to wear a loincloth while the other was not clothed at all, allowing clear observation of their forms, which seemed muscular and adult-like despite their small stature. The woman attempted to take a photograph with her mobile phone, but her dog's barking seemed to startle the creatures, prompting them to quickly disappear into the surrounding bushes before she could capture any evidence. The witness described these beings as resembling small, primitive humans, a detail that suggests a profound deviation from known wildlife or any expected forest inhabitant.